You're using technology invented to carve a waterway through the jungle. That monumental passage transformed the world, and its innovations are woven into the fabric of modern life. The Panama Canal opened in 1914 as an engineering marvel that connected two oceans and transformed global trade. But what most people don't know is that this deadly, ambitious project forced the invention of technologies and techniques that quietly revolutionized modern life. From the way we fight disease to how we manage billion-dollar projects, from concrete construction to public health protocols, the Panama Canal's legacy isn't just about ships, it's about the tools we use every single day. For centuries, explorers and merchants dreamed of a shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Spanish King Charles V first proposed the idea in 1534. Just 2 decades after Spanish explorer Vasco Núñez de Balboa visited the Isthmus of Panama. But dreams remained dreams until the late 1800s, when Ferdinand de Lesseps, fresh off his triumph building the Suez Canal, decided Panama would be his next conquest. He was catastrophically wrong. The French began excavating in 1880, but malaria, yellow fever, and other tropical diseases conspired against their efforts. Workers died so fast that hospitals couldn't keep up. Ironically, the French built a then state-of-the-art hospital to care for sick workers, but when hospital workers placed bowls of water to drown invading ants, the stagnant water became perfect breeding sites for mosquito larvae. After 9 years and approximately 20,000 deaths, the French attempt went bankrupt. The jungle had won. Bodies piled up so quickly that one laborer later described death as their constant companion, recalling how trainloads of dead men were carted away daily, as if they were just so much lumber. But America, eager to establish itself as a global power, saw opportunity in France's failure. President Theodore Roosevelt envisioned an interoceanic canal as indispensable for American dominance at the seas, allowing rapid deployment of U.S. Navy ships between oceans while bypassing the arduous 2,000-mile trip around South America's southern tip. Before a single shovel could touch Panamanian soil, though, the United States needed to secure the land. There was just one problem. Panama was part of Colombia. And when Colombia's Senate rejected a proposed canal treaty in 1903, fearing loss of sovereignty, Roosevelt decided to get creative. The revolution that followed was engineered with surgical precision. A French engineer named Philippe Bunau-Varilla, who had financial interests in the failed French Canal Company, wrote Panamanian conspirators a $100,000 check to fund the revolt. In return, he would become Panama's representative in Washington. Bunau-Varilla then arranged a meeting for revolution leader Manuel Amador Guerrero with President Roosevelt himself. Roosevelt carefully avoided directly endorsing the revolt, but told Amador that if Panamanian separatists revolted, the United States would view this as a positive development and could be counted on to act accordingly. He warned Amador to avoid violence, since the American people would not recognize independence gained through bloodshed. Satisfied with this tacit approval, Amador returned to Panama to set the plan in motion. Meanwhile, Roosevelt ordered the warship USS Nashville to proceed to Panama. On November 3, 1903, with U.S. Navy ships positioned off the coast, Panamanian revolutionaries declared independence from Colombia. The entire war was essentially bloodless. The U.S.-administered railroad in Panama removed its trains from the northern terminus, stranding Colombian troops sent to crush the insurrection. Other Colombian forces were discouraged from marching on Panama by the arrival of American warships. 3 days later, on November 6, 1903, the United States officially recognized the Republic of Panama as an independent nation. By November 18th, the Hay-Bunau-Varilla Treaty granted the United States exclusive and permanent possession of a 10-mile-wide Panama Canal zone. In exchange, Panama received $10 million and an annuity of $250,000 beginning 9 years later. The New York Times described the support given by the United States as an act of sordid conquest. Many Panamanians immediately condemned the treaty as an infringement on their new nation's sovereignty, a resentment that would simmer for decades until Panama finally regained control of the canal in 1999. With the politics secured through gunboat diplomacy, now came the impossible part, actually building the thing. When American workers arrived in 1904, they walked into a nightmare. Disease killed with terrifying speed. Yellow fever could strike on Wednesday morning, with symptoms appearing that afternoon, and death arriving by Saturday. About half the people who came down with it died. In the project's first year, yellow fever and malaria killed hundreds of workers. As death pervaded the canal zone, downtrodden chief engineer John Findlay Wallace made plans for his return trip home by importing a metal coffin. By June 1905, 3/4 of the original American contingent had fled in terror. Wallace followed suit and returned to the United States with his metal coffin, occupied by the corpse of one of his workers. Enter Dr. William Crawford Gorgas, a U.S. Army physician who would invent the public health playbook we still use today. Gorgas had a crucial advantage. American sanitarians entered Panama benefiting from the Reed Commission's 1900 work in Havana that confirmed the Aedes aegypti mosquito spread yellow fever, based on Cuban physician Carlos Finlay's long-suspected theory. While this seems obvious now, it was revolutionary then. For centuries, people believed diseases came from bad air. The word malaria itself literally means bad air in Italian, derived from mal and aria. But knowing mosquitoes spread disease and actually stopping them in a tropical jungle were two entirely different challenges. Gorgas had successfully eradicated yellow fever in Havana in just 3 months by implementing rigorous mosquito control measures. Now he faced an even bigger challenge in Panama. Initially, there was considerable resistance to his program, as the mosquito theory was still considered controversial and unproven by many officials. The political leaders in charge told him to keep his crazy theory to himself because everyone knew that those tropical illnesses came from malaria, bad air. Gorgas wanted to apply for $1 million to protect Panama. He developed a multi-layered attack strategy that became the foundation of modern tropical medicine. Gorgas divided Panama into 11 districts and Colon into 4. In each district, inspectors searched every house and building for mosquito larvae. If larvae were found, carpenters were dispatched to eliminate any places where stagnant water could collect. Mosquitoes lay eggs on water surfaces, and when larvae hatch, they live just below the surface, breathing through siphons in their tails. By eliminating standing water where possible and spreading oil on the surface of any remaining pools, the larvae could be destroyed. Workers with spray tanks were sent to spray oil on standing pools. Smaller streams were tackled by placing a dripping oil can over the waterway, creating a film of oil over each still patch of water. About 700,000 gallons of oil and 124,000 gallons of larvicide were used on the project. Gorgas installed domestic water systems in urban areas around the canal zone, eliminating the need for rainwater collection in barrels, perfect mosquito breeding sites. He organized massive programs to drain and fill swamps, with many miles of ditches dug and grass and brush cut back over wide areas. Then came fumigation. Gorgas fumigated the residences of Panamanians who had been confirmed to have contracted yellow fever. Pans of sulfur or pyrethrum were placed in rooms, and the right quantity of powder was weighed out, 2 pounds per 1,000 cubic feet. The pans were sprinkled with wood alcohol and set alight. When the effectiveness of this procedure was realized, fumigation was extended to all of Panama. Within a year of Stevens's appointment, every building in Panama had been fumigated, using up the entire United States supply of sulfur and pyrethrum. The results were miraculous. In 1906, only 1 case of yellow fever was reported, and by the end of the Panama Canal's construction, there were 0 cases every year. These mosquito control methods, drainage, fumigation, screening, elimination of standing water, are still the primary weapons used worldwide against mosquito-borne diseases. Every mosquito net over a child's bed in Africa, every drain maintenance program, every window screen in tropical hospitals traces its lineage directly back to Gorgas's work in Panama. His tactics for containing malaria and yellow fever became foundational for global tropical medicine and public health programs that continue to save millions of lives today. While Gorgas fought disease, another quiet revolution was unfolding in the offices and work camps, the birth of modern project management. The Panama Canal wasn't just big, it was unprecedented. By the project's end, Americans had excavated 239 million cubic yards during their construction era. Combined with approximately 30 million cubic yards excavated by the French, the total exceeded 268 million cubic yards, more than 4 times the volume originally estimated. The most dangerous work took place as laborers carved a ditch 45 feet deep and at least 300 feet wide through an 8-mile mountainous stretch known as the Culebra Cut, nicknamed Hell's Gorge. It was a cauldron of noise with roaring locomotives and belching steam shovels. How do you organize tens of thousands of workers, hundreds of steam shovels, millions of pounds of dynamite and thousands of railroad cars into a coherent operation? The answer: you invent a new way to think about projects. The most significant contribution to project management from the Panama Canal was the construction of the first work breakdown structure, a concept now central to operating and maintaining projects under budgetary and time constraints. A work breakdown structure does exactly what its name suggests. It breaks down massive, seemingly impossible projects into smaller, manageable pieces. By decomposing the canal project into categories like excavation, lock construction, sanitation, railroad operations, and hospital services, managers could assign resources, track progress, and identify bottlenecks. The scope of the project grew from merely building a canal to limiting the factors that caused illness and creating the infrastructure needed for success. By repositioning what work was necessary to be undertaken, the Panama Canal was able to be completed. This innovation spread from Panama to construction projects worldwide, then to software development, aerospace, and virtually every industry that handles complex initiatives. Today, every time a project manager opens their software to see tasks broken down into phases, milestones, and deliverables, they're using the mental framework invented to dig through Panamanian mountains. The canal project also pioneered systematic record-keeping for massive workforces and developed supply chain systems that could deliver specific materials to precise locations across dozens of miles of jungle. And here's what makes it even more impressive. The Panama Canal cost Americans around $375 million, including payments to Panama and the French company. It was the single most expensive construction project in United States history at the time. Yet unlike virtually any other such project on record, the American Canal cost less than estimated, coming in $23 million below the 1907 estimate, despite landslides and design changes, and was completed without any corruption scandal. The canal was finished in 1914, remarkably a year ahead of schedule. Walk past any modern concrete building, dam, or bridge, and you're seeing technology tested to its limits in Panama. Reinforced concrete was a relatively new construction method, only adopted by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the 1890s, and in Panama it was being used on a massive scale to build 3 sets of locks. The locks were one of the greatest engineering works ever undertaken when they opened in 1914. No other concrete construction of comparable size was attempted until the Hoover Dam in the 1930s. The scale was mind-boggling. The construction required over 2 million cubic yards of concrete at Gatun locks alone. The Gatun locks were built into a cut, made in a hill bordering the lake, which required excavation of 5 million cubic yards of material, mostly rock. But here's the terrifying part. No one knew if concrete would properly harden or cure when used in such massive volumes. The characteristics of the material when used in such high volume were unknown, so much so that engineers weren't sure the concrete would actually harden or cure properly. Core samples were taken of lock walls and floors during construction so the integrity could be tested. Imagine if it hadn't dried. To handle this unprecedented construction, engineers invented new delivery systems. Huge 85-foot high towers were built with 2.5-inch steel cables strung between them, creating overhead cableways. Buckets running on these cables carried up to 6 tons of concrete at a time into the locks. Electric railways transported stone, sand and cement from docks to mixing machines. Then another electric railway carried 2 6-ton buckets at a time to the cableways. The project forced innovation in concrete mixing ratios, aggregate sizing, water-cement proportions, and curing techniques. Cement use increased sevenfold in the years before the canal's construction. Modern skyscrapers, dams, bridges, and infrastructure projects all benefit from the concrete technology refined in Panama's humid jungle. Electricity was the only form of power that made the function of the locks possible, requiring control from a single remote location with instantaneous response time. At a time when the first building in Florida had been electrified just 21 years earlier with only 16 outlets, Panama was creating an entirely electric industrial system. Locks operations required approximately 1,500 electric motors for all controls. The General Electric Company produced about half the electrical equipment during construction, and virtually all permanent motors, relays, switches, wiring, and generating equipment. The innovation wasn't just using electricity, it was the sophisticated control systems. The design of lock control boards was particularly critical, functioning as working miniature models of the locks. The system forced operators to go through precise processes in proper sequence and didn't allow for errors. This pioneering of automated electric control systems influenced industrial automation for the next century. From factory assembly lines to modern logistics centers, the principle of electric centralized control originated in Panama's locks. No pumps were used at the Panama Canal. Water does its work by force of gravity alone, admitted or released through giant tunnels 18 feet in diameter, running lengthwise within lock walls. Branching off at right angles to these culverts, smaller culverts run laterally under the floor of each lock chamber, 20 to each chamber. Each cross culvert has 5 openings for a total of 100 holes in each chamber for the water to enter or drain, depending on which valves are opened or closed. This large number of holes distributes water evenly over the full floor area to control turbulence. The lock chambers themselves are massive concrete structures measuring 1,000 feet long, 110 feet wide, and 40 feet deep. Each lock gate has 2 leaves, 65 feet wide and 6.5 feet thick, set on hinges. The gates range in height from 46 to 82 feet, and their movement is powered by electric motors recessed in the lock walls. Even though some gate leaves weighed over 745 tons, their design and water buoyancy made them effectively weightless when moving in the locks. Behind every innovation was tragedy. The Panama Canal was one of the deadliest construction projects in world history, leading to approximately 25,000 to 30,000 deaths. The vast majority of deaths came from the French era, with an estimated 20,000 to 25,000 killed. Official U.S. records show over 5,600 workers died during American construction, though many historians think the real toll was several times higher. While disease reduction dramatically improved health for white workers, black workers, the majority of the canal workforce, continued to die in large numbers at 10 times the rate of white workers in 1906. While medical care was provided to all, housing was not provided to workers, many of whom had to live in tents and tenements outside the mosquito-controlled zone. In the end, 350 white workers and 4,500 black workers had died during American construction. The dangers extended beyond disease. Workers blasted away at mountains with upwards of 60 million pounds of dynamite, which could ignite prematurely in the tropical climate. Excavating machines also detonated unexploded charges. In December 1908, one such accident killed 23 men. With the yellow fever threat abating, accidents replaced disease as the largest cause of death in the canal zone by 1909. Risks of death in Hell's Gorge ranged from drowning to electrocution. Hundreds, if not thousands more, were permanently injured. Artificial limb makers clamored for contracts with the canal builders. Many workers who lost limbs received prosthetics, only if the Canal Commission determined they would otherwise become public charges. And even then, officials were clear that individual cases should not set precedents. Other men were not so lucky. Many were deported, and some ended up working on a charity farm attached to the insane asylum. These workers, mostly recruited from Barbados, Jamaica, and other Caribbean islands, paid with their blood and bodies for innovations that would benefit the entire world. The Canal Commission's massive labor recruitment on Barbados is said to have brought 40% of the island's working-age men to Panama, cutting the population from 200,000 in 1900 to 172,000 in 1910. Years later, a few of the old men who survived wiped away tears in documentary footage, almost unable to believe they survived at all. You might think the Panama Canal is just history, but look closer at the world around you. When public health officials respond to a Zika or dengue outbreak, they deploy mosquito control methods pioneered by Gorgas. When project managers use Gantt charts and work breakdown structures, they're using frameworks developed to organize canal construction. When engineers pour massive concrete foundations for skyscrapers or bridges, they rely on techniques refined in Panama's jungle. When modern logistics systems coordinate thousands of moving parts, they echo the supply chain innovations that kept the canal project running. Even the way we think about tackling seemingly impossible challenges, breaking them into manageable pieces, using systematic approaches, applying scientific methods to traditional problems, traces back to Panama. David McCullough wrote, "The creation of a water passage across Panama was one of the supreme human achievements of all time, the culmination of a heroic dream of over 400 years. The 50 miles between the oceans were among the hardest ever won by human effort and ingenuity. The Panama Canal didn't just connect two oceans, it connected the 19th century to the 20th, proving that science, organization, and determination could overcome nature's greatest obstacles. The innovations born in that deadly jungle, in public health, project management, construction technology, and industrial automation, quietly transformed modern civilization. So the next time you benefit from well-organized project planning, walk past a massive concrete structure, or see mosquito control measures protecting a community, remember, someone invented that technology while digging through a mountain of rock in Panama, surrounded by death, driven by an impossible dream. The Panama Canal wasn't just about ships passing through a waterway. It was about humans inventing the future, one innovation at a time, one life at a time, building tools and techniques that would shape the world for generations to come. That's the real legacy of the Panama Canal, not the water that flows through it, but the ideas that flow from it into everything we do today.